We're here with John Jekovich speaking about his book, Their Mother's Son. We're working on Chapter 8, page 205, and it's April 22nd, and we're broadcasting from the underground command post deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building. So here we go with John Jekovich. And your dog tag number?
42092965.
Okay. We're picking up at Haverfordwest.
Haverfordwest, yeah.
Before John Jekovich ships out to combat. So here we go. We sat there a bit longer, closer to each other, not by so much in which we said, but more importantly, that what we not said. This is what Anne was trying to convey to me, but I was too preoccupied with my immature thoughts to comprehend the full significance of it. I felt relieved with that the assumption began to fully enjoy Jean's company. I knew that it would be ultimately come to the end of what would always remain would be a pleasant and cherished memories of a wonderful person and whom I was privileged to get to be a part of. We walked back to the college and we stopped at a gate. I embraced her and kissed her. Good night and thank you for a very pleasant time. She smiled approvingly and said, tomorrow after 1200 hours, kissed me lightly on the cheek and hurried in the cottage. As I walked up the cobblestone street, I thought how strange it seemed to be in a strange country and stranger yet surroundings under different circumstances. Who did you have thought that I'd be doing this 3 months ago? And more to the point, who would have thought that I'd be seeing another person as soon after saying goodbye to Anne? What she would say or think if she knew my present situation? Strangely, I could not think of a better place to be than right here in a small, nondescript town with all its kind and simple faces and their non-conforming and unorthodox way of life. This would be far superior to the life I led before entering the military service, but in my wildest imagination, I could not see a way in which this would be attainable. I did not want to even think about going back to the life of nothingness and empty despair. This morning being Sunday, our only standard procedure option was to march to chow in formation, as no stragglers were allowed to just saunter down the street to the mess hall. As I was hungry, I got up and dressed in my fatigues several minutes before the formation formed outside the street. A little over half of the company fell out, as the rest were either sleeping in or on some detail, on pass, or sick call, and we were accountable in some other way. The breakfast was delicious, as usual, consisting of baked eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, toast, and all the hot coffee you wanted. After the usual 45 minutes allowed to eat, we waited outside to fall in for the march back to the billets. What the procedure accomplished was that it made it difficult to stay down here in the heart of the town after chow on weekend. Instead, we focused to go back up and change and walk back down individually. The mess hall uniform was fatigues, helmet liner for just that purpose. The uniform for pass in or sign out was AOD, tie jackets, overseas cap. In my situation, I was not going to back down. Rather, I was going to up several tiers. I dare say that how many soldiers had never seen. I did improvise upon the procedure during the rest of our stay in Haverfordwest. I would sign out in fatigues under the pretext of showering, which I usually did, but instead of returning to the billets, I would head up to Jean's cottage. This worked well for most of the time. After the 1200 hours chow, I avoided Feek and Larson and scurried into the orderly room to sign out and make my way up to Jean's cottage. On the way up, civilians would wave to me as they stood in their doorways, talking in groups of twos and threes. There were not too many young males about, and the younger girls my age all would glance at me and smile and wave hello. I felt especially elated and macho at their display of interest, never thinking of a moment that they were starved for companion of the opposite sex. When we got outside, I stopped and looked at Jean and exclaimed, "You look beautiful and smell gorgeous." She laughed and held my hand again as we walked down the gate. I asked her if she was tired and they were out rather late last night before and she had to go to early services that morning. She said no as she sidestepped the puddle of water from the last night's downpour. I do it all the time. I'm quite used to it. I asked her if she'd eaten and she was vague and obscure about it, which meant that she did not. At that moment, we passed an outbox public phone, and I stopped, and inside she called a cab or cabbie. She attempted to sidestep the issue. As I persevered, she finally concurred. "Where do you like to eat?" she asked as fingering through her small phone book in the phone box. I said, "I do not know," and what she used to her own discretion. She then mentioned a place her parents frequently took her. "Great," I replied. "Ring them up and instead call a cabbie." She found the number and got the operator. Haverfordwest 197. She repeated the number twice to the operator at the other end. "Please send a cab to 47 Abercastle Road." She again repeated the cottage address. As we waited for our ride, Jean insisted that this was all unnecessary, since we would have been there by now if we continued walking. So it was a short distance, he still took a cab.
Yeah.
Oh, brother.
Yeah.
After a 20-minute wait for the cab arrived, and Jean gave him our destination. "Pembroke House," she stated, as we sat in the rather cramped rear seat. I thought it was great for being cramped, as we were. Jean's skirt has a tendency to be pulled upward, which exposed a good part of her knees. The ride down the several tiers were exhilarating, to say the least, and Jean just kept looking at me, smiling at each other. Each time, the driver took the sharp curves, almost leaving the road and heading off for one of the cottages. I was holding Jean's hand. I noticed that she was wearing nail polish in light pink, which is very appealing and appropriate. Her hands and fingers were smaller than Anne's, but still expressive of the rest of her body and stature. We finally reached the hotel, which was the center of the town. As I attempted to pay the driver, I finally gave up and handed a fistful of change to Jean to sort out and pay the cabbie. Was the money confusing there?
Yeah.
Was the money denominations confusing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, always.
As we entered the lounge, I was impressed with the huge log fire blazing in a mammoth wall-sized fireplace. I felt warm and very friendly, where one could just sit and stare into the radiant glow. We were escorted into the dining room, which was large and spacious, and I was immediately drawn to the old-world original beam ceiling. The beams must have been 3 foot across and were huge, which added a great deal to the atmosphere and nuance to the dining area. Our table seated 2, and Jean began looking at the menu that was placed before us. "What would you like?" she inquired to me as she polished her nails. As her polished nails figured a large-sized menu card. "You order," I replied. I don't believe I understood the menu description. She smiled and said she would surprise me. As she ordered, as I watched her, I began to think of the providence that had thought both of us together. It looked like the match made in heaven. Jean was attractive, sincere, and warm-hearted person, and both of us seemed to be attracted to one another. I was fascinated with her Welsh accent and just started beginning to appreciate it and understand it fully. There was nothing pretentious or boastful about her. But being the mayor's daughter, although insignificant in worldly affairs, was a big thing in people's minds in a small town like Haverfordwest. It was the last thing on my mind. I am sure she must have been held in high esteem by the townsfolk, but the very fact that she was a mayor's daughter, it did not sway her one way or the other, which was one of the attributes of her I was slowly coming around to admire greatly. Another of her low-key presentations of her talent for music and a subtle way she discussed its appearance. It still felt uneasy regarding the episode we had about it several nights ago at her house, and I was still greatly reluctant to approach the subject, even though I felt I had recovered from its experience sufficiently. I knew she felt that I could help her in this regard, but I was at my wit's end, trying to come to some fruitful conclusion in a way that would be beneficial to her. She wanted music to be so much part of her life, yet there was no realistic solution to how to obtain this goal. Her parents were unaware of her dilemma, and even if they knew, there was no possible way they could aid her financially for higher schooling. So, okay, bye Claire.
All right, night.
Take care of yourself. Good night, Claire.
Good night.
Got bored.
Good night, Claire.
Good night. Have a good night. Good night, honey. Okay.
Good night, Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Okay. Her parents were unaware of her dilemma, and even if they knew, there was no possible way they could aid her financially for higher schooling she so desperately desired. There was no governmental aid available for talented students such as Jean, and if no one recognized or cognizant of her predicament, she would be just another statistic, lost in a gray area of nonconformity. The meal she ordered arrived, and I looked at me in a wondrous anticipation as I scanned the various plates and platters. The food was attractively displayed, although much of its contents looked unfamiliar. I said something complimentary regarding it, and then asked what she had ordered. She listed it briefly and hurriedly. 4 tenderloin shakes in a delicate green curry sauce, poached sea bass with cumin-scented carrots, and I wondered at her culinary and creative talents, only mentioned it briefly, saving it for another day. So it seems like they have lamb a lot at Haverfordwest.
Yeah, well, they had that was the main food.
So lamb's everywhere there.
Yeah.
So how'd you like that dinner?
Dinner was good. Mashed potatoes. It was an English dinner though.
So it was very tasty.
Yeah.
Did it come out hot?
It was hot. Yeah, it was hot. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll bet you lamb's still a big thing in Haverfordwest.
Lamb's got a funny taste anyway.
I'll bet you it's still there.
Yeah.
Do you remember when Aunt Millie made duck?
Oh, yeah.
How'd you like the duck?
Duck. Then she made duck soup.
How'd you like it?
Well, I mean, she killed it when she came up with the duck soup. It looked like step out of a tree. Yeah.
You gotta be kidding me.
Huh?
It looked that bad?
Yeah.
Did Grandma like it?
No, Grandma didn't like it. No, Grandma didn't like it. I don't think she ate it.
Looked like it came out of a latrine, oh my word. Then there were the exotic baked goods imaginable. Most I had never tasted before. As I sat there and gorged myself on the delicious, mouth-watering selection presented, Jean advised me to partake of the puddings. There were several to choose from: lemon, plum rice, and tapioca. As it turned out, tapioca became my favorite, with rice pudding coming in a strong second place. One of the friendly servers, who was attired in a headscarf and a frilly white apron, gave us a short history of the evolution of pudding. The earliest puddings, according to this friendly server, were the 14th century sausages, which evolved over the next 200 years and gradually turned into the form of dessert, boiled in a bag or cloth. Then, as the process became more sophisticated, the pudding was placed in a buttered bowl, covered with the cloth, and steamed. Finally, in our own times, it was baked, chilled, coated with a mixture of eggs, sugar, scalded milk, and become invariably a custard. She concluded by saying that all the puddings take a long time to cook and warm, very filling and inexpensive. She also warned us not to eat too much of one kind, as we would be too filled, savoring the remainder assortment. We both thanked her for her historical personal touch to our meal and came away enlightened, pleasantly informed on the history of pudding in England and Wales. I complimented Jean on her excellent selection of dining place and the outstanding meal she selected. We must have sat there and enjoyed our meal for over several hours. Being her company added further to the pleasantness of a memorable Sunday afternoon. Before we left the dining area, Jean succumbed to the same ritual which all females fall prey to, retiring to the ladies' room to readjust themselves and freshen up. She returned smiling, and I watched her as she approached her table. She walked gracefully and somewhat poised, and her figure was flattering and most inviting. As she sat down, I got a whiff of freshly applied perfume, and I acknowledged it by smiling slightly and looking approvingly at her. We sat there for several minutes, waiting for the change from the dinner check, and I asked Jean the appropriate tip or gratuity should be. She replied, usually 8% of the total cost of the dinner. I asked her for help in sorting out the money, and she cheerfully assisted. All in all, it was a pleasant Sunday, and I enjoyed it immensely. Jean played an important role in this enjoyment. With that, we departed the dining room, and we walked on to the sidewalk. As it was still fairly early in the day, I asked Jean what she wanted to do now. She took my arm and said that we should walk for a while and take in the sights. The sights and the sounds of a small town like Haverfordwest were slight, and timidly modest. The absence of any automobiles was still quite noticeable to me, as were the great number of people riding bicycles. The town itself appeared like no other town I had seen before, with its quaint little stores dispensing every imaginable item. There were open-air viewing merchandise displayed in the front of the stores, with no attendant in a prominent sight. When you made your purchase, you went inside the store. If you find a clerk or owner, you paid him directly. If no attendant could be found, you simply left the correct amount in a little pewter bowl provided and departed with your merchandise. As we walked closeness of Jean aroused my inner desires, and the clicking of her pumps on the pavements reinforced it all the more. We approached what seemed to be a theater or cinema. It was quaint, small marquee announcing that Mrs. Minerva was playing here today and tomorrow. On an exclusive tour, not to see it again for several months. I did not tell Jean that I'd seen the movie with Ann 6 months ago to the day. She began excited at the thought of seeing her favorite movie star, Greer Carson, and again asked if we might go see it. I smiled at her childlike glee, attended the movie, inquired still in line, and obtained tickets. As I purchased the tickets, I discovered the preferred seats were in the balcony, just opposite our theater order. Climbing the stairway to the balcony, I once again noticed Jean's small buttocks as her well-shaped legs and ankles.
Balconies were the best seats.
Where was that?
Balconies up there in England were the best seats.
How big were the balconies?
How big?
Yeah.
It probably sat 200 people.
And below, how many people did it seat?
Right.
Not in the balcony, but the general seating. How many did that seat?
How many people in a row? I'd say about 10.
Okay. And in the balconies, was smoking allowed?
No.
No smoking?
No smoking at all in the theater.
Okay. As it turned out, how was the movie?
Yeah, it was an old movie. They got it from America.
And how did Jean like it?
How did I like it?
Yeah,
I'd probably seen it 4 times.
How did Jean like it?
That's probably the first time she saw it.
Was she excited to see it?
Oh, yeah. They don't see many movies.
No. And was there a big turnout there?
Well, if there was a theater up, that was a Friday night. That's a big night.
Do they have the typical refreshment stand with popcorn and drinks?
It was down in the balcony, yeah.
What type of drinks did you have there?
They had ginger ale, coffee, tea, and some other godly thing. I don't know what the hell that was.
And was the tea warm?
What?
Was the tea warm?
Tea was warm, yeah.
And how about the popcorn? Do you remember having the popcorn?
They didn't have no popcorn.
No popcorn?
No.
Hello, have a nice evening. Take care of yourself.
Have a nice evening.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
All right. So in general, it was a very pleasant experience in the movie theater.
Yeah.
Was the movie theater very old, or was it a new build?
It was probably built during the war.
Oh, yeah.
War for the military.
I put my arm around Jean's shoulder with the other and took her hand in mine and began stroking it gently. She turned, are you listening? Are you listening? She turned and smiled and then became enraptured with the movie. Having seen Mrs. Minerva several times, already my interest and attention were directed in different channels. I began to touch and fondle Jean's breasts. And each time I was confronted with a playful slap on the hand. I would then attempt to put my hand on her knee, and this was shunted away by grasping my hand and holding it tightly. As the drama was unfolding, Jean did not lose the slightest interest in the drama on the silver screen. I would then press my leg up against hers, and she did not object too strenuously to this maneuver, even though as excited as my other attempts. I still held her hand and individual fingers interweaving that of my own and gently pressing them together. After several futile attempts at perceiving various segments of her anatomy, I gave up in despair and concentrated on the movie. Strangely, I would recall parts of it and relate them to the events at the time with Anne.
What was the name of the movie?
The name of the movie was Miss Minerva with Greer Carson.
Oh,
Greer Carson, Miss Minerva.
yeah, Miss Minerva, yeah, Miss Minerva.
Tell me what it's about, I don't know. What was it about? What's that movie about?
A movie about some family living out on the farm.
And what country does it take place in?
What do you mean? It took place in England.
England?
Yeah.
And you seen that where, in the States?
Haverfordwest.
Hello? You want to help her, Jen? Yeah. And you seen that movie in the States?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and let me ask you, when you seen it in the States, what city or what town was it playing from? Where is the setting? What year was the movie?
Yeah, it was probably during the war, the war.
Hi, Claire.
Have a sit down. Yeah, sit down.
Have a seat, Claire.
Yeah, let me see if it fits any better this time.
Okay.
Oh, you're back, huh?
Well, I came to see if the seat fit better.
Okay. We'll update you, Claire. They're in Haverfordwest in Wales, and John Jakovich is dating Jean, and they went to see a movie with Greer Carson. It's called Mrs. Minerva.
Minerva. Mrs. Minerva.
They're seeing it right now.
You saw that movie, right? Yeah.
How did you like the movie?
It's been probably 40 years since I saw it.
Was that movie made before you were born?
I think so.
Yeah. And how would you pronounce it?
Minerva.
Miniver. Okay, Mrs. Miniver. And Jean, my father said at that point, he's seen the movie 4 times in the past, but Jean from Haverfordwest has never seen it, and she was very excited about seeing it.
Yeah.
It was a real big thing for her. Very nice. Strangely, I would recall the past that I had with Ann. It was almost interesting to do this movie unfolded, and we recall was almost 100% on almost every event. After a while, the news trailer came back on the spot, and we had come in on, and I asked Jean if she wanted to sit through another session of the main attraction. She quirked up her nose and rose from the seat, waiting for me to exit the row of the seats. Walking out of the theater, we saw it was very dark outside as we stood in front, deciding what to do next. The air was becoming cooler. I suggested hot tea as a refresher. We walked for a while and came to the...
That's your shoes you
Yeah.
Hang on one second.